Alright, I didn't have a paper one, so I've pulled up a fret calculator from online on my phone to measure out my distances. Because my fretboard is now parallel, I can do this. I want to go in millimeters and I want to get as close to I can. My ruler only does millimeters by themselves, but if I've got like 36.726 here, so I've got 36, I find 36 and I go a little farther. I want to find that point. And I can draw myself a line. The next one is 71.392, so that's closer to the 1. So there we go. We're getting it as close as we possibly can. And I'm going to continue in like manner all the way up the fretboard. I'm marking out 20 frets. I'm going to do them all in the same way. Once I've got them all marked, I'll put this in my jig here and I will cut my frets with the saw. So this is where we're starting. I'll mark all these out and I'll be back. Okay, so I have marked my frets. I've taken it out of the tape here. I've now found a center line, and I did that by measuring from one side over to the other. Divided by 2 and got a line here. And I measured that same amount down here and I connected. That gives me a center line all the way down the board. And if you're looking at it, you'll notice, or you may be able to notice, that there's a little bit more wood on this side than this side. And that's okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my width at the nut here and my width at the 12th fret. And I'm going to make those lines, and it's going to be a tapered line down the length of the fretboard. And I'm doing that by finding my center line. I know that I want my width at the nut to be 50 millimeters. So 50 divided by 2 is 25. So I put my 25 right on that line. And I mark my 5. And I mark 0. And that gives me 2 lines down here, mark 50. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. At my 12th fret, I know that I want it to be 60 millimeters. Real easy, because then I can just put the 3 on the line and measure the 6 and measure the 0. Now, I have marks. Take my good straight side here, find my marks, and mark my taper all the way down, both sides. Okay. Now I generally like to cut my frets before I cut or plane the taper off of here. I'll be planing. I don't have a whole lot of extra wood on the side. If I had a lot of extra, if this was a really wide blank, I would cut it so that I could keep that excess. I just don't have that much. I have a lot here, but you can see I get real close to my line up here. So if I put that here real close, you can see my pencil mark gets real close to the edge, and so I want to make sure that I don't plane that off. So I'll be planing it instead of cutting, because it'll just make life easier. Alright, the edge to me is my straight edge, so when I put it here in my jig to cut here, because my saw is along here, I will probably cut it backwards, work it in this way. But I've got to get that set up, so that's where we're going to stop for now. Alright, well, starting out this morning bright and early, a couple of things. I got the strip pulled out of, this is the decorative strip for the back. I got it pulled out of the glue up clamping. And it needs a little trimming up and some cleaning up, and it'll be ready to go. This morning though, I'm going to be starting with the fretboard. So in our last video I showed you that I got it all marked. Well, I've got it all marked. I've got taper marked. I've got my arrow to show me which side is flat, and I have my jig set up on my bench to be able to start cutting those frets. I'm going to be using a fret saw that I had picked up. I believe I got this one from LMI before they went out of business, but any small toothed resharpenable saw that so small tooth, I mean, like, it's got a lot of teeth per inch. They're very fine. There's little to no set on this blade. Occasionally I rub it with a piece of a candle wax to kind of give it some lubrication. But the kerf on this saw has to be small enough to be able to cut the area for the fret tine. And so your fret tine is this bottom area here, and it's usually like a tenth or a thousandth of an inch, 0.20 or 0.02 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but you want to make sure that your saw cuts the same or slightly narrower kerf for your frets to be able to seat in the fret slot and not pop out and not fall or need to be glued or something like that. Now when I do put them in, I will glue them anyway, but that being said, I want my kerf to be exactly right if I can do that. So the other thing to pay attention to is that this saw, the handle is over here, and that my saw teeth are facing this direction, so I know that it cuts not going forward as a push but coming backwards as a pull. So this is a pull cut saw. So that being the case, when I set this up into my jig, I'm going to get a little closer here so that y'all can see the operation when I get going with it. When I set this in my jig, I want to make sure that I get my straight edge on the side where I know that my saw is going to be pulling to. If I know I'm coming this way across it, then I want to make sure that that is blocked up against there. Now, I also have some lines, like I have a very dark line here. There's a little bit of cut in there where the saw, occasionally I'll do some other stuff and cut in there, but basically I line up with the saw kerf where it's going to be, make sure that my saw is completely up and down, and then I cut. And in actuality this one, and that one's canted. So I'll begin cutting. One here on the end I don't need as much, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch that one so I have a spot for another saw to cut. Because that will be the 0 mark, or where my nut will sit. Alright, so this is not cutting very well, and it's because it needs to have a little bit of wax on it. So, give me a moment, we'll be right back. Alright, and through the power of magic, I have my candle wax here. And take my blade, I'm just going to rub that along there. And I'm done. There's enough wax on there to keep me going. If you're concerned about your wood moving, if you're not comfortable holding it in place with your hand, you can clamp it. And really, I don't have to go too deep on these. I just need a mark in the most part right now. And I can go deeper later. So I'm going to get a few of these done on camera like this, and then I'll turn it off and finish it up. If you don't have a fret saw, some of those Japanese saws like you buy, Japanese hardtooth saws like you buy at the hardware store, can work. You just have to be careful because sometimes their toothing is so aggressive that it cuts a kerf a little bit wide for what you need. So sometimes you have to adjust them a little bit, a little trial and error to make sure they're going where they need to go. You're noticing each time I do this, I'm double checking to make sure that I am exactly over my mark that I made when I measured out my scale length. Because I don't want it to be off, I want it to be exactly on that mark. If you're off a little bit, it'll mess with the intonation of the guitar. You'll have a note that'll be out of tune. So alright, I'll stop right there. I'll finish the rest off camera because I've got a whole bunch more.